Hi. Um, I am
Hello.
hello. I am talking to all of you from a hotel in scenic Cedar Falls, Iowa. I live in Cedar Rapids. It's a different town, but we got our asses handed to us by a giant. I call it a Midwestern hurricane, but I believe the term is a derecho. Derecho. I literally just heard it the other day, and I was like, it's a Midwestern hurricane. So these winds tore through our town, big giant storm. My house, like half a tree fell on my house. It's fine. It's fine. Minor damage. But that's, I mean, it's like when 2020 is like, here's a bowl full of suck. Then they put a shit sandwich on top of it. So I am in a hotel room. I apologize if a dog or a child comes through the screen, but I feel like it's almost, oh, here they come. It's almost like so fitting. It's so fitting for the book because the book is about the state of motherhood in America, which in pandemic has just been progressively getting worse, or not worse, but all those things that we've used to kind of, support up the system they've all been taken away. And now we're all just in hotel rooms screaming, metaphorically, I think. So, Dr. Jen, thank you for joining me. I think I'm gonna read just a little bit, and then Dr. Jen is going to grill me and tell me all the things I got wrong in the book.
Oh. No. I just wanted to say I'm so excited to meet virtually. And you know what? I don't think there is a more befitting way to sort of launch your book than with mega multitasking.
Right. It's just all the multitasking. Here, I'll just show you guys real quick. You guys want to say hi to the Zoom?
Hi, Zoom people.
Hi guys.
All right.
Oh, we get puppy.
Okay, we're done. Okay. All right. Cuteness.
So
over.
yes.
Okay.
So yes. So I would love to read. Oh. So yeah, so please read to us,
right.
what you want from the book, and then maybe afterwards let us know why you picked that section.
All right, I'm going to pick a little bit, I'm going to pick this section that was excerpted on L for two reasons. One, because when I escaped my home, I didn't bring a copy of my book because I thought I'd be home by now. And number two, I think it's a really good way to start talking about the myths and mythologies that we use to tangle up women's bodies. So this is about purity. It's in a chapter on purity. On my 16th birthday, my father gave me a ring. It was Black Hills gold, a yellow band with a heart made of flimsy pink and green gold leaves. This was my purity ring, the ring given to represent a pledge to safeguard my virginity. It was my commitment to abstinence and to God to keep myself pure until marriage. And I hated it. Plus, it only sort of worked. I'm an 80s baby. My teen years were heavily influenced by the Christian counterculture of the 90s. Movements like True Love Waits advocated strict rules on sexual purity as a response to what people like my parents saw as an increasingly promiscuous society. They propelled Joshua Harris, a homeschooled kid and author of the 1997 book I Kissed Dating Goodbye, onto bestsellers lists when he was just 21 years old. The book, which encouraged couples to save kissing for their wedding day, sold over 1.2 million copies and remains a fundamental text for Christians who want to encourage their children to keep it in their pants until marriage. In 2018, after years of criticism, Harris released a documentary about the book with a pseudo-apology, noting that he never intended to hurt anyone, and ceased publication of the book. Then he got divorced and asked for privacy. I reached out to him multiple times for multiple stories I wanted to write and got no response until finally he told me he wanted me to respect his privacy. He built his career on telling others what to do. But okay, now we had to leave him alone. But his book, those lessons, had never left me alone, even when I have begged them to, even when I, too, have gotten divorced. But at 16, I didn't know all of this was coming. I knew I didn't like any of it, but I so desperately wanted to be perfect, holy, and right. So I said thank you to my parents and wore the ring. Part of me was excited. It was jewelry. I hadn't received much more than earrings from Walmart at that point in my life, and I craved something that would give me the gravitas and glamour of adulthood. Anyway, what could I have said? No, I don't want your ring. I kind of want to fuck around a little before marriage. There are certainly 16-year-olds with the guts to say something like that to their parents, but I wasn't one of them. I was type a people pleaser who just wanted to do the right thing. So much so that she'd wear a silly ring, cross her legs, and hope Jesus would save her purity. Again, it only sort of worked. In college, my purity ring got stuck on a shower loofah. When I extricated it, the leaves were bent. I put it away after that, joking with my friends about the implications of having broken this symbol of my virginity in the shower. As an undergraduate, I was chosen by my professors to present a paper on the hero's journey and my obsession with Joseph Campbell at a research conference. Also, I'm sorry, but I definitely was obsessed with Joseph Campbell. I had beaten out 2 seniors for the spot. My school's English department was footing the bill. It was the first time my writing had ever stood out. The first time it meant something. The night before the presentations, I was invited back to a dorm room by some of the other students. At first there were many, and then just me and 2 men. We were drunk and got drunker. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I know I made out with one. There are other flashes of memories too. My clothes are off and I want them on. My body hurts and I'm afraid. I go back to my room and lock myself in. I remember the thick metal click of the lock. In the morning, someone tried to open the door. They shook the handle and pounded on the frame with a fist. They didn't mean anything by it, they yelled. It was just a thing. No one said my name. I don't think they ever knew it. I lay in bed until they were gone. Then I looked up the nearest Planned Parenthood. I called a cab and overdrew my bank card, paying for the ride. They gave me the morning after pill, and I went back to the university where I washed my face with clean and clear Morning Burst face wash. For years after, the bright orangey smell would make me sick. That afternoon, I gave my presentation to a full room. I talked about heroes and choices and destiny. People clapped and told me I would be an academic. Afterwards, I bled. I hadn't been expecting my period. I went into the bathroom and put a finger in the thick, oily blood, thankful for the darkness, the wetness. That was when I decided the moment hadn't happened. To survive, I would forget it. If I thought about it, everything would break. It would be the end of the life I had wanted for myself, the one where I was married to someone God-fearing, a Republican, a Midwesterner, the one where I cooked every night and bought throw pillows and spent hours thinking about paint colors for my walls, the one where I was the perfect mother. So I decided it didn't happen. If I had sex with them, then I was no longer a virgin. If I was no longer a virgin, then the man I was dating would not want to marry me. And I couldn't handle that. The man and I did end up getting married, and on my honeymoon, I presented the purity ring to him. Laughing, I told him the story of my 16th birthday. He put it away, and I never saw it again. We hadn't had sex while we were dating. Abstinence was a mandate he took very seriously, and one I took seriously only because he did. Plus, I was hiding a secret. I was hiding the fact that I had gotten drunk in a dorm room with some boys. I believed I had been assaulted. I couldn't tell my boyfriend. To admit that event would have compromised my virginity and compromised my desirability. Once in the early years of marriage, I was tempted to say something, to clear the air, and unburden myself of a lapse I was beginning to think might not be entirely my fault. In bed one night, I asked my husband a hypothetical question. What if someone had been assaulted? What if then? He told me he was happy I hadn't been. He wouldn't have married me if I hadn't been a virgin. He wouldn't have wanted me to be the mother of our children. I said nothing. After all, maybe nothing had happened. I hadn't bled that night at the conference. At the time, I believed what I had been taught about the hymen. Let's talk about it. That it was a membrane sealing the vagina, and that any dick entering or exiting would leave physical evidence of penetration. When my husband was my fiance, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Hold on 1 second. Cool. All right, we'll just finish this one up. Okay. So I believe the myths about the hymen. So when my husband was my fiance, I had shown him articles that explained what a hymen really was and that described how it could be disrupted by any number of activities, that it was more of a myth about virginity than an actuality. But I only half believed these articles myself. I was nervous. I didn't want him to hate me, to devalue me for what I might have lost, what might have been taken from me. It didn't occur to me until much later that by tying my value to my virginity, I had already allowed him to devalue me. I was married for 12 years, but I never once told my husband about that night in college, and I barely told myself. All right, on that note, let's talk.
Oh, that's so I read that in Elle, and it just brought everything back from reading the book. And it's so, it shouldn't be an act of bravery to speak about the things that happen to you, but that's what happens when the way our bodies are weaponized, that women can't speak about intimate things that have happened to them, about assaults, that everything that happens to your body, whether something natural or something someone did to you, it's shameful. You're always on the edge of a knife.
That moment was something that I started grappling with when I was watching the Kavanaugh hearings. I was sitting there watching them in the home that I had rented to move out of. I had just left my marriage, and I was sitting there on this bed, and I had my computer up, and I was watching the Kavanaugh hearings, and all my friends were texting to me and to others their own stories. And then I hopped on Twitter, and people were talking about their own stories. And there was a friend of mine whose story was very similar to what happened to me in college. And when she texted that to me, I just started crying, because I was like, because that was the first moment that I allowed myself to admit that it had happened, right? And then come to terms with it. And then, call my therapist, get an emergency session, go talk to friends. And I'm so lucky to have a good therapist and great friends. But, I think, having Dr. Blasey Ford have her bravery really kind of ripped off a wound. And then, I just would hope that I can pass that on. I went to go get wine the other day to celebrate this event, and I went to my wine shop, and the wine lady who had read the excerpt started crying and telling me she had her own story too. So, it's just what we expect of women and our bodies is so hard, and there's some ways I'm glad I didn't tell anybody about it, because my parents would have pulled me out of college, right? There would have been all these repercussions. I might not be here if maybe I hadn't held it in, but yeah, that's the calculus.
I think that, and it's this idea that this tragic experience is so common, and the fact that women are unable to discuss it only contributes to not only the shame that shouldn't even be there, the fact that it's common, because I often think that if we were allowed to talk about it more, might that actually change how men act, or those men? I don't know, but since we're never allowed to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it affects how we view a woman's ability to mother, like it views how we view women's purity. I mean, like 90s up into the early 2000s, it was full of talk shows that like were about paternity tests, right? Where it was basically just slut shaming moms. Like, you know, what was that?
Yes.
You know, but that still exists in our culture where we have this expectation. You know, a funny thing that makes me laugh, that's also not very funny, is that, you know, there's all these articles that are like, now you're a mom, you have to dress modestly. And it's like, how do you think I fucking became a mom in the first place? And it wasn't by dressing modestly. So, you know, so it's like that one too, like you can't be a mother without, well, you can be, actually, I should say, you can be. There's a lot of roads to being a mother, but you know, to impregnate yourself, there's really only, you could use a turkey baster, whatever, but you know, sex is
something's going in.
Something's going in, yeah. To get the baby in, something's got to also go in. And so, you know, so it's like this 1-2 thing where it's like we expect mothers to cover it up. Don't, you know, be modest. Don't be slutty. But then it's also like, well, how are you going to get that in there anyway?
Really, I got that through the whole book, that women are constantly walking this edge of a knife, just constantly, all the time. You slip on one side, you're a slut. You slip on the other side, you're a prude. You know, you're always too something, right? You're too much, you're too little, you're too soft. And that burden of purity, virginity, and the burden of motherhood is even placed on want-to-be mothers who don't have any desire. It's like it contaminates. It's like an ink stain that contaminates everything.
Oh, absolutely. You know, one of the things that were happening while I was, you know, writing the book was Cardi B was having her baby, and you know, Duchess Meghan was having her baby, and the Duchess of Sussex, I don't know, don't yell at me. But you know, watching the commentary on those two women of color, like having their babies too, and realizing how much worse it is, you know, like that just, you know, watching the stories that, you know, were just criticizing Meghan for everything she wore, right? And then Cardi B too, you know, when she was pregnant, people jump into her Instagram comments and be like, how can you be a mother and wear that? It's like, easy. I just do it because this is my job. But yeah, those expectations still exist and are there for everyone. So.
Yeah, the burden is quite significant. And, you know, you mentioned Kavanaugh and the hearings. As an OBGYN, I can tell you those days in the office were heavy. And the day Trump was elected, oh my God. For a whole week in the office, all I did was listen to women sob about their assault stories by men similar to him. And no one wanted to talk about their actual medical condition. Just the trauma of having leaders like that was so palpable because, you know, every woman who's been assaulted, told she was shit by a doctor, every woman who's been told something bad, that, you know, it was the patriarchal system. And here we are, like, you know, this is 2020. We're supposed to be beyond that. And here we have stamped proof in the Supreme Court, in the White House, that we are nowhere near beyond that. And the trauma was just so real. And your book actually brought a lot of that back.
I think we carry that trauma of our culture in our bodies because it's not just, it's not like a theoretical thing, like Trump saying he's gonna grab a woman by the pussy. It's not just this like theoretical thing. It's not like you know, some like abstruse concept, you know, like that we're just gonna vaguely debate, see both sides of. This is a literal thing that has happened to women, and the trauma that we carry inside our bodies, and that trauma is something that we have learned to disassociate from just to get through. And I think that, you know, the trauma of the Trump presidency and the Kavanaugh hearings, and Lord knows what else awaits for us, is that it continues to drudge up this, you know, this dank river of our culture and bring it all to the surface again. And in some ways it's okay, but in other ways it's just physically exhausting. And I think a lot of women, you know, the trauma of sex then relates then to the trauma of birth, I think, in a really kind of prescient way. So
yeah, I mean, if you've been fed these myths about the hymen and about what sex is like since, you know, you were young, what else would you expect? And even if you weren't fed those myths in your household, you're exposed to them everywhere. There's shelves of shit in the drugstore to make your vagina smell like a fucking peach or whatever. And, you know, I mean, it's just everywhere. And there's always some dude, or the cover of every woman's magazine. They are messed with vaginal pH and discharge than I am. I'm a fucking vulvar expert and a gynecologist. Like, it's like, dude, there's like more to women's bodies than just the, I hate to say that, but it's true.
no, why doesn't everybody talk about my sexy elbows? Like, why can't I be lusted after for those?
You know, nobody talks about my sexy nares. I mean, come on. Like,
okay,
so hot. If you like orifices so much.
I want to talk about your sexy hair, and I just want to call it out for the 79 attendees that we have that look at how beautiful Dr. Jen's hair is. Isn't it so beautiful?
You're so sweet. See, you can be old. See, it still goes up in menopause, bitches. It's going to be okay. So
get rid of that uterus.
And you know what? And don't call it gray. You're going titanium. Your titanium core showing through.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about, so we're talking about myths and mythologies, and I was so excited that you said you would do this with me, because one thing that really tripped me up while researching the book was about the ultrasound. So let's move from sex to now the baby's in your body, right? And researching this, and I was reading just like a lot of incredible academics that talk about how ultrasound images have kind of been taken by the conservative right and used as like, oh my God, you can't kill the baby because look, this is a baby. Look at that picture. To me, it looks like an alien squirrel, and I'm totally fine with killing alien squirrels. But but there is that dynamic of making the internal external, and the process of it separating the baby from the mother is, and I know ultrasounds have saved lives. Like, I have a friend who has a baby right now, and you know, their lives were saved by an ultrasound, which caught some early problems. So so I want to ask you, like, what's your take on ultrasounds and how they're being used, and how can women and men understand them better in our cultural context without kind of falling into that, like, you know, pro-life thing?
Right. So I think it's a really great point in the book, the idea that ultrasounds have sort of been weaponized against pregnant people. And, you know, first of all, something medical should never be used politically. So first of all, there's that, you know, hard line, you know, this idea that people are taking, you know, medical images and making up things about them. It's no different than the people making up things about, you know, coronavirus. You know, it's the same thing. It's, you know, fake news, it's medical misinformation. The problem is the better and better ultrasounds have become, you know, the more you see what a fetus looks like. And, you know, that imagery can be weaponized and made it, what happens is when you use terms like heartbeat as opposed to fetal cardiac activity, or you see an image like that makes it look like, you know, that fetus could actually walk and talk, which of course it can't, you start to make it sound like you're having an abortion on a 3-year-old. Right. And so those images are being sort of misused in that way. So, and of course, you know, they're altered and they're made to look far better than the snowstorm that things usually look like, you know, on the ultrasound. Well, a little bit better than that, but, you know, so there's that. And so yeah, you're taking this private this private thing and making it public, but that's the whole gambit, or part of the gambit of the, you know, the forced birth movement, right? Is that your body doesn't belong to you.
Right.
It belongs.
And those images really kind of, those images so take the baby away from the mother, because at that point the fetus cannot survive without the mother. Like, they're the same thing, but to kind of separate them out and to pit them against each other just seems like this pernicious use of medical technology that is damaging the way we think about babies and pregnancy.
Yeah, it's completely dehumanizing for the pregnant person, right? It's sort of like you're this isn't like Brave New World. You're not like some, you know, it's not like it was hooked up to a test tube. It was hooked up to a person who probably has ankles, you know, the size of Idaho, and, you know, has, you know, a headache, and, you know, is feeling unwell. That's, you know, that's why that, you know, because those ultrasounds are usually from, you know, they're usually things that were stolen textbooks, or, you know, I think, you know, I suppose someone might have donated their image for that. But so I think you take this thing that has a important use, and the problem is so many people see so many ultrasound images, they think they're familiar with it, you know, so they think they know what they're seeing, and that, I think, adds to the problem. So I think it's a very real concern. I think that whole, you know, imagery of taking just the fetus, and, you know, you don't even really see the wall of the uterus. So it's like, you know, you've sort of taken the fetus out as if there was no person there, but we're not meant to consider, you know, the pregnant person.
Yeah.
So it's a very effective strategy.
And yeah,
so
I
you
think
need to write a think piece just on that.
Well, I feel like I put a lot in the chapter, but I feel like I wrote.
You did, but I think you could even like, you did, and there was a ton of it in there, but I was like, but, you know, as an OBGYN, I was like, oh, I want to read about more. What other like medical things are we doing that way?
Well, I want to talk to you about talking to OBGYNs, because I talked to quite a few for the book, and none of those interviews made it into the book. They, of course, informed my research and guided a lot of what I was going to say, but one of the reasons those interviews didn't make it into the book was because I felt, don't be mad, but I felt like people got, doctors, even women doctors, maybe especially women doctors, got really, really, really defensive when I started wanting to talk about the way that medicine is not just science, the way that it has been influenced by culture. You know, when I wanted to talk about why women are kind of robbed of agency in the delivery room, when I wanted to talk about that culture that says, you can't decide for yourself, I'm the doctor, we're going to do it this way, right? Which in some cases is great, but it's a complex situation. So all my conversations with doctors got a little, even my best friend from fifth grade, her mother is a doctor, and even that conversation got a little, you know, to where I didn't want to sell anybody out down the river, but I did want to be smart. So I wanted to talk to you about that. Like, what's happening in medicine, especially in America, to where that it's really hard having these conversations about like why women aren't given agency in the birthing room.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complicated reasons for that in America. And I think it's many of the things are uniquely our system here, right? So, you know, every other country, there's universal health care, every other, you know, industrialized country. So we have that sort of that difference. So right off the bat, you know, we have, you know, this concept that, you know, that everything has to go through the health insurance. So everything, like sort of the billing and the complexities and the way everything goes, which I still don't even really understand. No one understands it except health administrators. So it's sort of it's almost like this payment is almost a little bit adversarial, because doctors have no control over it. Like, you don't know what the hospital's going to charge. You don't, like, all these things you have no control over. You know, I moved to the States during a time where it was probably the peak medical legal climate in the States. And I was shocked at the difference in practices here between Canada. that everything, so many people were so worried. And the thing is if you do something that your health insurance company doesn't approve of and you get sued, well, they can drop, they drop you the next time. So you can't get health insurance anymore, like medical malpractice insurance. And so much of the sort of the medicine is not just the patriarchy of medicine, but it's the patriarchy of the legal system. I mean, our good friend John Edwards is the one who successfully argued that a woman in labor can't give informed consent. So that you are to, and so, he successfully, you cannot give informed consent. So basically the standard of care for getting somebody to decline a C-section became basically badgering them. I mean, and so if maybe don't have good communication skills to begin with, and then you have this litigious sort of nature and these court precedents, and you have insurance companies telling you it's the worst recipe possible, and then you have no diversity in medicine. So it's sort of like every single thing is stacked against you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you write, patient declined C-section and you're not badgering her, you're like, well, this is what I recommend. And the patient says no. And you say, okay, well, this is what I think is going to happen. You write it in the chart and something bad goes wrong and you get sued. Well, then the lawyer can say, well, you didn't impress it upon her enough how much she needed the C-section. And so it's sort of the whole system to be adversarial. And so much of it is because of poor communication. And I blame physicians for that. That's not, as the patient, it shouldn't be your job to be a good communicator. But I also, blame the whole structure of the system.
Yeah. From insurance companies on up.
That's an answer.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I can see, I can see where as a doctor caught in the middle of that, it's really hard to parse it all out, right? Like culture and pressure and insurance companies and what's happening in the room, and that maybe we just need to burn it all down and start again.
Another huge problem is the way labor and delivery units are staffed. You bring up where I trained, you didn't get called to the delivery until the baby was coming out. The nurses labored with the patients. You were very not hands-on. You were just there when you were absolutely needed. And here in this, but if you're not staffed to have one-on-one nursing, you can't do that. We have all these epidurals. There isn't enough staffing to have a nurse in the room all the time. So we've sort of taken these support people away to make it cheap, to make everything cheaper. Who are we making everything cheaper for? The insurance monolith and, hospital administrators. And so, women wanting a C-section, women wanting a vaginal birth after a C-section in a rural hospital. If there's no in-house anesthesia, the hospital is going to refuse and say you can't, that patient has to have a C-section or she has to go somewhere else. So you have all these how do you even solve that problem? I mean, do you close down these small birthing units? Well, no, then what about the women who weren't going to need a C-section, that were going to deliver okay? So it's, but I think the first issue is to talk about it. And that's why I think a book like yours is so important, because if we don't start putting the issues on the table, we're never going to fix them.
Yeah. I want to remind everybody listening, we're going to start taking questions from y'all here really soon. So I see one question. And so if y'all want to just start stacking them up in there, we'll get to them. Ask all your vagina questions. Ask all your wet ass pussy questions. I know my children are in the room. It's fine.
No.
It's fine.
So, but I want to hear from you sort of.
Okay, yeah.
So I want to hear when you decided you had to write the book. I want to hear the conception story.
So the story of this book is kind of interesting because I had a book that I really wanted to sell, and I'm reworking I'm kind of revising it. Maybe I will sell it someday, but I was sending it around everywhere, and it was sent to Remy Colley, who's this wonderful editor, and at the time she was at Norton, and my book was about growing up religious and then kind of casting off that mode of womanhood and trying to find a new mode of womanhood. And she was like, and this was early 2016. She was like, I love this book. I want to work with you, but nobody thinks that religion is important. And this was before the 2016 election. And she's like, I can't get anybody to buy it. But so she and I had this lunch, and it was a very kind of fancy lunch. She took me to this like French restaurant. I was like in New York one time, so she took me to this French restaurant, and I was like, salads, I don't even know how to eat. I don't know how to eat it. And, and we start talking, and she's telling me that she's been reading this series I had been writing for Jezebel about mythology and women's bodies. And she was like, this is the book that I want. She's like, I want you to talk about how, rabbits, how some woman back in the 1600s shoving some rabbits up her vagina relate to our medical misconceptions today. And I was like, okay, all right. And so we worked together. We had this proposal. I sold it. I signed the contract in early 2017. And then my marriage completely fell apart. And then my life completely fell apart. And then the deadline for the book was growing closer, and I had been doing all the research, and I had been outlining, and I had some chapters here and there. But at one point I was freaking out. I was like, I can't write this, because the mother I was when I sold the book is not the mother I am now. When I sold the book, I was married, a mother of one boy and one girl. We lived in a house in the middle of the country. Yeah, there's the girl. And I was one kind of mother. I was the perfect mother, right? I had like a mom blog. And then by the time I went to write the book, I was a single mother. I was doing scandalous things like dating, and and everything had fallen apart. And so I kind of freaked out and was like, I can't write this book. And one of my good friends, Matthew Salesis, whose novel is out today, Doppelganger Disappear, which is really great. But he was just like, put it all in. He's like, who cares? Like, he was like, put the mess in the book. I almost bought my way out, but and then Remy helped me revise the outline to be the genius kind of outline it is now. And if you haven't seen the book, it's outlined on 4 trimesters. So first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, and then the fourth trimester, which is kind of like that immediate post-birth time. So it almost didn't happen because of how broken and frustrated I was as a mother. Also, as a single mother then working, I didn't have any time to write it. And so I had to kind of fit it into the seams of my life. I was writing it between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And so it was born of a reality. Wow. Yeah.
Right.
But I'm very proud of it.
I think that it's wonderful. And I think putting all the heartache and all the reality in is so important, because we don't talk about those things. And the reality is coming home to a house that feels like a dead house, where you feel like you're alone, even you're with someone who's supposed to love you, is the worst kind of alone, And if we don't talk about that, how are people going to know that they deserve more? So all of that was wonderful. So I love that. And I loved all the fruit, you're congratulations, you have like a melon, you have a watermelon. I really loved all those fruit. You have to read it to see, but sort of the size of this sort of mythical pregnancy as it's progressing is sort of in fruits, which I liked a lot. So it's the fruits of your labor.
My best friend is from college, is having her first baby in October, and I'm so excited for her. But she tells me her app shows her baby's size in French pastries, and I was like, "What? That's so great!" She's like, "Today I have a little eclair," and I'm like, That's my baby. So yeah, let's answer some of these questions.
Yes. All right. You can see the questions? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we supposed to go to the Q&A or the chat?
Go to the Q&A. I'll
Q&A.
start. There's
right.
this great question about
Okay.
is there going to be more research into fibroids? And I like this question because I just wrote about this. My Congresswoman Abby Finkenauer is trying to get Congress to fund more research into endometriosis, and I know our now who's running with Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, has been trying to get a lot more research into other uterine problems as well. And so no, like uterine problems are one of the most underfunded areas of medical research, and that's, that has to do with taboos, that has to do with the fact that women don't talk about these problems, fibroids, endometriosis. We don't talk about it because to talk about our pain, to look our male friends in the eyes and say, I can't sit through this meeting because my uterus is literally on fire right now, is hard because we're expected to suck it up. And so it's important to elect women who are going to be in charge of things, because they will say, hello, we cannot have equality in healthcare until we start funding these problems. And they're not just women's problems, they're human problems. Sorry, I'm gonna go on a rant. Because if men think they're gonna procreate a species but not give a shit about the uterus, then they don't know how any of this works. Did I take care of it? Is that good?
I think, but I just also like to add to that, actually there are a lot of therapies besides hysterectomies, and they just never seem to get offered, which is really sad.
Yeah.
That the communication skills I get down with to, people only hear about one treatment and they come in and then they're only offered one treatment, or it's offered in a way, all the other treatments are offered in a way that you would turn them down. Whereas, there actually are quite a few treatments that are not always that effective, and we definitely need more research. But what I actually see as a physician is people just not even getting the full spectrum of, there's an oral medication for fibroids, there's the IUD that can be useful, there is, uterine artery embolization, and then finally a hysterectomy. So they just don't even get those things that we already have offered, which is a huge problem.
Yeah.
So,
I see what reactions to the book have surprised me the most so far. Yeah. So I when I was writing this book, at first I thought it was going to be these really deeply researched essays into weird things, and then it kind of became about myself and life, and then I organized it all weird with these little like Dr. Jen was alluding to, each trimester begins with kind of a sarcastic riff on what a baby advice book might give you. And so it kind of turned into this, it turned a little weird, a little fun, but also, so I'm just actually surprised that people are resonating with it, right? At some point I was like, is this going to be accessible if I do it in this way? Because it's so different, I think, than other pregnancy books. It's different than any other mom book I've ever seen. And so I think what surprised me the most is how excited people are about it. I gave it to my therapist, and I gave her my other book too, and she was like, thanks, and set it aside. I love her, but she's honest. And then I gave her Belabored, and then she started reading it, and then she was texting me the whole night. That night, she's like, I can't put this down. I really, really like it. So I think I'm just, the thing that surprises me is how many women feel the same way I feel, which was, that's shocking to me, because I don't know. If you're a writer, you're also in your own little world, and you're like, no, I'm going to write this thing, and I hope somebody likes it. Yeah. Why don't you?
I think a lot of people have liked it.
Dr. Jen, why don't you take the next one? In the broken medical system, how can we best advocate for ourselves?
Well, my personal belief is with knowledge. I think that if you understand what's happening to your body, if you know what the treatment options are, you're able to do it. You'll be able to tell if someone is giving you the spectrum of advice, that's good. You'll be able to, sort of be able to ask questions. I love when my patients come in, they have read so much and they're so informed, and we can then take sort of the discussions to the next level. So I think the best way to advocate for yourself is with accurate factual information about your body. So and I always think that I had a very complicated pregnancy, and that's what I think set things apart for me, was that I knew how to ask all the questions.
But I think a lot of women, especially women of color, go in very smart, very knowledgeable, and just aren't listened to. So do you recommend women also getting like doulas if they can afford it? Like what other thing? Because, very smart women, I'm thinking of Dr. Tressie McMillan Cotton's birth story. She's literally one of the smartest women in America, and she went in and she wasn't listened to by her doctors. So, is there anything else we can do besides just being the smartest in the room?
Well, unfortunately, I think having an advocate with you is a really important thing. It should be, but absolutely, because sometimes you're not in a position to be able to advocate because you feel unwell. So I think that that's also a really important thing, that, these cases that I read about, when you see these stories of these women who died, and I think, I don't even understand how that happened. That these are not crazy, unusual medical things that the 1 in 20 million that people could have missed. These were very common things. They were very common. The most common causes of maternal mortality are these things that we're seeing over and over again. And I think it is, people get dismissed. I think the way knowledge can help there is then you're being dismissed. At least you then have an idea that you're getting bad information. I don't want to make it sound like I'm putting the onus on the patient, but then to walk away. If you're able to, and you have someone who can advocate for you, then you can say, okay, this is not the right advice, and so we need to be somewhere else. So I think that background of knowledge at least helps when you're getting bad advice. But people are unwell and they're vulnerable, and having an advocate, and also programs, insisting on diversity in programs, I think is also, is something that we can ask our politicians to insist on.
Yeah, I think something I saw Dr. Cotton tweet recently is she talked about how she will walk out of a doctor's office. And that's literally never occurred to me to do before. And I think that's a great way to advocate for yourself, is to be ready to walk out if you don't feel respected. I love that.
I think that you're the expert for you. I think that, you can, I always say, if you're with a doctor and you think, oh my God, I couldn't sit beside this person for half an hour on an airplane, how are you going to be able to trust them? You have to be able to have a rapport with this person. And so many doctors really have such a difficult rapport. And I think that then they miss sort of the little clues in conversation. So I think we have a long way to go. And hopefully we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. So Catherine asks, how does the story of the woman who gave birth to rabbits relate to medical ideas of women's bodies today? So, two things. One, the amazing writer Alyssa Gabbert, who also has a book out today, The Unreality of Memory, if y'all need another book. She wrote an incredible essay about this woman. Oh my God, I'm gonna forget her name right now in a second. Who back in the 1600s pretended to give birth to rabbits so she could get rich. She didn't, but she did fool a lot of men. The way that I love the story is in a kind of a crass way, because it's like women's bodies are still a mystery. Like that was like in the age of enlightenment, a woman could still fake giving birth to rabbits, and men would be like, okay, girl, this seems legit, and I think there's a lot of that still today. if anybody's ever had sex with a man, you know what I'm talking about. Like, so there's just like so much mystery around our bodies that shouldn't be there, because at some point as a society, we've just been like, well, can't figure that out, we'll do something else. And so I think it's funny, but it's also infuriating that we've given up so easily on solving the mystery of women, of our pain, and our problems.